Dragnet. If it is true that our rates and rhythms of blinking refer directly to the rhythm and sequence of our inner emotions and thoughts, then those rates and rhythms are insights into our inner selves, and therefore as characteristic of each of us as our signatures. So if an actor is successful at projecting himself into the emotions and thoughts of a character, his blinks will naturally and spontaneously occur at the points that the character blinks would have occurred in real life. A footnote. One of the things about unsuccessful acting is that the actor blinks seem to come at the wrong times. Although you may not notice this consciously, the rhythm of the actor's blinks don't match the rhythm of the thoughts you would expect from the character he is playing. In fact, a bad actor is probably not thinking anything like what the character would be thinking. Instead, I wonder what the director thinks of me. I wonder if I look okay, or what's my next line? I believe this is what I was finding with Hackman's performance in The Conversation. He had assumed that character of Harry Call and was thinking a series of Harry's thoughts, the way Harry would think them, and therefore was thinking in rhythm with those thoughts. And since I was absorbing the rhythms he was giving me and trying to think similar thoughts myself, my cut points were naturally aligning themselves with his blink points. In a sense, I had rerouted my neural circuitry so that the semi-involuntary command to blink caused me instead to hit the stop button on the editing machine. To the same end, one of the disciplines I follow is to choose the out point of a shot by marking it in real time. If I can't do this, if I can't hit that same frame repeatedly at 24 frames per second, I know there is something wrong in my approach to the shot, and I adjust my thinking until I find a frame that I can hit. I never permit myself to select the out point by inching back and forth, comparing one frame with another to get the best match. That method, for me at any rate, is guaranteed to produce rhythmic tone deafness in the film. Anyway, another one of your tasks as an editor is this sensitizing of yourself to the rhythms that the good actor gives you, and then finding ways to extend these rhythms into territory not covered by the actor himself, so that the pacing of the film as a whole is an elaboration of those patterns of thinking and feeling. And one of the many ways you assume those rhythms is by noticing, consciously or unconsciously, where the actor blinks. There is a way of editing that ignores all of these questions, what I would call the Dragnet system from the 1950s TV series of the same name. The policy of the show seemed to be to keep every word of dialogue on screen. When someone had finished speaking, there was a brief pause and then a cut to the person who was now about to talk. And when he finished speaking, there was a cut back to the person who nodded his head or said something. And then when that person was finished, they cut back again. It extended to single words. Have you been downtown yet? Cut. No. Cut. When are you going downtown? Cut. Tomorrow. Cut. Have you seen your son? Cut. No, he didn't come home last night. Cut. What time does he usually come home? Cut. 2:00. At the same time, when it first came out, this technique created a sensation for its apparently hard-boiled police blotter realism. The Dragnet system is a simple way to edit, but it is a shallow simplicity that doesn't reflect the grammar of complex exchanges that go on all the time in even the most ordinary conversations. If you're observing a dialogue between two people, you will not focus your attention solely on the person who is speaking. Instead, while that person is still talking, you will turn to look at the listener to find out what he thinks of what is being said. The question is, when exactly do you turn? There are places in conversation where it seems we almost physically cannot blink or turn our heads since we are still receiving important information. There are other places where we must blink or turn away in order to make better sense of what we have received. And I would suggest that there are similar points in every scene where the cut cannot or must occur for the same reasons. Every shot has potential cut points, the way a tree has branches, and once you have identified them, you will choose different points depending on what the audience has been thinking up to that moment and what you want them to think next. For instance, by cutting away from certain character before he finishes speaking, I might encourage the audience to think only about the face value of what he said. On the other hand, if I linger on a character after he finishes speaking, I allow the audience to see from the expression in his eyes that he is probably not telling the truth, and they will think different about him and what he said. but since it takes a certain amount of time to make that observation, I cannot cut away from the character too early. Either I cut away while he is speaking, branch number 1, or I hold until the audience realizes he's lying, branch number 2, but I cannot cut in between those two branches. To do so would either seem too long or not long enough. The branch points are fixed organically by rhythm of the shot itself and by what the audience has been thinking up to that moment in the film. A footnote. One way to shift the actual branch points themselves is to place the shot in a different context, where the audience will be thinking and noticing different things. But I am free to select one or the other of them, or yet another one further on, depending on what realization I want the audience to make. In this way, you should probably be able to cut from the speaker to the listener and vice versa in psychologically interesting, complex, and correct patterns that reflects the kind of shifts of attention and realization that go on in real life. In this way, you establish a rhythm that counterpoints and underscores the ideas being expressed and considered. And one of the tools to identify exactly where these cut points, these branches, may be to compare them to our patterns of blinking, which have been underscoring the rhythms of our thoughts for tens of thousands, perhaps millions of years of human history. Where you feel comfortable blinking, if you were really listening to what is being said, is where the cut will feel right. So, there are really 3 problems wrapped up together. 1. Identifying a series of potential cut points and comparisons with the blink can help you do this. 2. Determining what effect each cut point will have on the audience. And 3. Choosing which of those effects is the correct one for the film. I believe the sequence of thoughts, that is to say, the rhythm and rate of cutting, should be appropriate to whatever the audience is watching at the moment. The average real-world rate of blinking is somewhere between the extremes of 4 and 40 blinks per minute. If you were in an actual fight, you would be blinking a dozen times a minute because you are thinking dozens of conflicting thoughts a minute. And so, when you're watching a fight in a film, there should be dozens of cuts per minute. A footnote. This would make the audience participate emotionally in the fight itself. If, on the other hand, you wanted to create an objective distance to have the audience observe the fight as a phenomenon in itself, then you would have to reduce the number of cuts considerably. In fact, statistically, the 2 rates of real-life blinking and of film cutting are close enough for comparison. Depending on how it is staged, a convincing action sequence might have around 25 cuts a minute, whereas a dialogue scene would still feel normal in an American film, averaging 6 cuts per minute or less. You should be right with the blinks, perhaps leading them ever so slightly. I certainly don't expect the audience to blink at every cut. The cut point should be a potential blink point. In a sense, by cutting by this sudden displacement of the visual film, you are blinking for the audience. You achieve the immediate juxtaposition of 2 concepts for them, what they achieve in the real world by blinking, as in Houston's example. Your job is partly to anticipate, partly to control the thought process of the audience, to give them what they want and or what they need just before they have to ask for it, to be surprising yet self-evident at the same time. If you are too far behind or ahead of them, you create problems, but if you are right with them, leading them ever so slightly, the flow of events feels natural and exciting at the same time.